Every small town has whispers hidden behind weathered doors, behind overgrown fences, behind the kind of shadows people pretend not to see. But few secrets are guarded with the steadfastness of the one Ethan Cole stumbled upon. It began as so. Many things do, in a quiet rhythm of routine. Each afternoon, without fail, he noticed a lone German shepherd sitting before a decaying, abandoned house on the edge of town. He had quietly given the dog a name: Shadow. Shadow never barked. Never pawed at him for food, never whined for attention. It simply sat, unmoving, as if suspended between time and memory, as if waiting for someone who had long since vanished. To most passers-by, it was just another stray, an ordinary shadow among weeds and peeling paint. But to Ethan, a former soldier, searching for something that even he could not name, Shadow's ritual was the first ripple in a pond that would swell into a mystery buried for more than 70 years. What lay within that house, waiting, forgotten, decayed, would change everything he thought he understood about the town, about life, about loyalty. When Ethan first came to the mountains of Oregon, he hadn't been searching for mysteries at all. At 48, he was no longer the man who had stormed through desert heat or navigated war-torn streets in distant lands. Those memories now existed only in fragments, like torn photographs of a younger self. 2 decades of military service had taught him discipline, endurance, and the cold arithmetic of survival. He had watched too many companions fail to return, carried too many silences in his chest. He wasn't tired of life, exactly, only of the noise it demanded, the orders, the chaos, the constant motion of a world that never paused. The cabin he had purchased stood solitary at the edge of a pine-covered ridge, far removed from the hum of town. It nestled in the hush of towering trees, beneath a sky so wide and open it made the mountains feel infinite. He had chosen it unseen, drawn not by charm or condition, but by a promise: solitude. The kind of quiet that had to be earned, the sort of stillness that could not be bought. He kept himself busy. Days passed in careful routines, chopping firewood until his muscles ached, tending to the small stretches of land surrounding the cabin, repairing what time had taken. The simplicity of it offered comfort, a balm against years of regimented chaos and the ghosts of commands shouted across static-filled radios. It was on one crisp autumn afternoon, when leaves burned like scattered embers across the forest floor, that he first felt it. The old, unmistakable sensation of being observed. He paused mid-swing with the axe, a soldier's instinct bristling in his spine. At first, he dismissed it as paranoia, a remnant of his old life. But when he turned, there, at the edge of the tree line, he saw the dog. Shadow, tall and powerful, eyes locked with his, not aggressive, not fearful, but heavy with some intelligence that seemed almost human. Then, as silently as a mist curling through the trees, the dog vanished, leaving Ethan alone with a sudden, weighty quiet. The silence that followed was not the familiar comfort he had come to cherish. It was different. Dense, tangible, as though something had been drawn away, leaving an invisible hollow in its place. And in that emptiness, something stirred deep within him, a curiosity, a caution, a pull he could not yet name. In the days that followed, Shadow returned like clockwork, appearing in the late afternoons just as the sun slanted through the pines, casting long golden shadows across the forest floor. Ethan would be outside, splitting firewood or raking leaves, and the prickling sensation along the back of his neck would announce the dog's presence. Shadow never crossed the boundary of the yard, never barked, never moved closer. He simply watched, tall, noble, unnervingly still. Those amber eyes followed Ethan's every motion, patient, deliberate, full of knowledge that seemed to stretch back decades. Ethan did not attempt to call him over, nor did he tempt him with food. He had worked with military dogs before, creatures, trained for precision, loyalty, and sacrifice. He knew trust could not be demanded, and that even animals carried secrets of their own. Shadow, however, was unlike any dog Ethan had known. No handler, no leash, no vest to mark a purpose. Yet everything about the dog spoke of intent, of a mission only it understood. Shadow moved like a soldier on patrol, silent, alert, meticulous, in observing his terrain. In a strange way, it reminded Ethan of himself, or perhaps the version of himself he had once been, sharp, disciplined, unflinching. In the evenings, he began to speak to the dog. Quiet words murmured into the dying light. "Evening, Shadow. Long day." The dog never answered, never flinched. Yet he remained. He became part of Ethan's routine, part of the rhythm of the fading daylight, though no hand ever touched. No command was ever given. A silent accord formed between them. Two souls, each bearing the weight of old grief, circling one another in understanding and restraint. Then, one day, the pattern shifted. Shadow did not appear at the usual spot. Ethan waited on his porch, mug in hand, eyes scanning the edge of the trees. The minutes stretched, heavy and quiet. Just as he turned to go inside, a movement far down the gravel road caught his attention. Shadow trotted with purpose, tail low, muscles tense. He was not wandering. He was heading toward something. Curiosity piqued, Ethan followed at a discreet distance. The road wound into a forgotten corner of the neighborhood, where trees pressed close and asphalt gave way to gravel and moss. Beyond a rusted iron gate, past a crumbling stone wall, he saw it, the old Granger house. Its paint had long since peeled away, exposing splintered wood like bleached bone. The yard was a battlefield of thorns, dead leaves, and silence. And there, perfectly still in front of the gate, sat Shadow. Straight posture, ears alert, gaze fixed. Ethan melted into the shadows of the pines and watched. Shadow did not move, sniff, or shift. He simply waited. Something in that stillness tightened Ethan's chest. This was not coincidence. It was ritual. The next day, the same. And the day after that, rain or shine, cold or wind, Shadow returned to that same gate, same posture, same unwavering watchfulness. It was as though he expected the door to open, as though he believed someone, or something, might still come back. Ethan began to understand. Shadow was not lost. He was remembering. The image of the dog at the gate became etched in Ethan's mind, impossible to shake. A quiet devotion radiated from every line of his posture, born not of curiosity, but of loyalty, of grief, of memory. Nights found Ethan staring at the cabin ceiling, thinking, what is he waiting for? What memory lingers? Behind that rotting door, strong enough to pull him here, day after day, he did not have answers, only instincts. And his instincts whispered that the dog carried a weight others could not see, a secret the world had forgotten. The following afternoon, Ethan prepared an offering. Fresh water in a clean metal bowl, a scoop of high-quality dog food in another, placed at the precise spot where Shadow always sat. Then he walked away, never looking back. The next morning, the bowls were untouched. The same the day after. But on the third evening, when he returned, the food was gone, the water stirred, though Shadow was nowhere to be seen. Something had shifted. From that day on, the quiet ritual continued. Ethan never saw the dog take the food. He never saw him drink the water. Yet each morning the bowls were empty. It became an unspoken covenant, a bridge of respect between two beings bound by patience, solitude, and unspoken grief. He was not taming Shadow, nor seeking companionship. He was simply acknowledging a presence as deliberate and steadfast as his own. Slowly, the silence between them became something more. A connection built not on words, but on shared understanding, grief, and loyalty. The day everything changed, the sky hung low with heavy clouds. Ethan stood by his cabin window, arms crossed, watching as Shadow settled at his post outside the Granger house. The dog sat with the same unwavering stillness, eyes fixed on the darkness within the broken windows. But today, there was a difference. Slowly, deliberately, Shadow rose, padded toward the sagging porch, and climbed the cracked steps. One paw, lifted, then gently scratched at the door. Not insistent, not demanding, tender, pleading. Ethan felt it deep in his chest. That was no ordinary gesture. It was a request. Moments later, he was lacing up his boots, walking the gravel path under the gray sky, heart pounding as it had not in years. The house grew larger as he approached. Weathered wood, rotted edges, vines strangling the fence, a place long abandoned by time. But Shadow was waiting. Ethan circled to the back, where an old basement window lay broken, jagged glass rimmed with rust. He brushed away debris, hoisted himself up, and climbed inside. The floor, layered in dust and silence, greeted him with a soft thud. The air was thick with damp wood, old paper, and the residue of decades gone by. Weak light filtered through grime-coated windows, casting long shadows over furniture draped in yellowed sheets. The house felt like a photograph someone had forgotten to develop, frozen in another decade. Shadow slipped in behind him, quiet as a whisper. With purpose, he moved through the living room and stopped beside a large armchair covered with a yellowed sheet. A gentle nudge at its base, then a look back at Ethan, those amber eyes glinting with quiet urgency. Ethan crouched, reaching under the chair, hand trembling slightly. Something cold and rigid met his fingers. Heart thudding, he lifted it carefully. The shape was unmistakable. A worn dog collar. Stiff, dried, curled at the ends, cracked like old parchment. Its color had faded from rich brown to a pale, lifeless gray. A small metal tag, dulled with age, clung to the leather coated in grime. Ethan held it delicately, thumb brushing against the tag. He took a slow breath, then began rubbing it gently, wiping away the years, with quiet reverence. Bit by bit, the grime gave way, revealing the faint glimmer of engraving beneath, a single word etched in elegant, time-worn script. Justice Shadow didn't move. He simply turned from the armchair and walked, deliberate and silent, toward the narrow staircase, leading upward. Then he paused at the first step, looked back, and waited. Ethan understood. He followed, each footstep creaking beneath his weight as they climbed into the attic. A space so still it felt sacred. The air changed as he entered. It was warmer here, closer to the roof, thick with the scent of old wood, dry fabric, and dust, untouched for decades. A single beam of sunlight pierced through a dirt-caked window, scattering across boxes and forgotten furniture. Shadow moved with certainty, nose low, weaving through old trunks and scattered debris. He stopped in front of a weathered military footlocker. Tucked beneath the eaves, its olive drab paint flaking, its latch rusted shut. The dog nudged it gently, then stepped back, eyes fixed on Ethan. Ethan knelt, took a breath, and opened the lid. The scent of cedar and thyme spilled out. Inside, everything was arranged with careful precision. A stack of yellowed letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. A handful of black and white photographs. A small wooden figure of a German shepherd hand-carved, smoothed by years of touch. Ethan picked up the top photo, a young woman with light inner eyes and a laugh frozen in motion. Beside her stood a soldier, tall, proud, uniform pressed sharp. At their feet, a puppy, ears too big for its head, tonguing in a toothy grin. Justice. He opened the letters one by one. They told a story of love, of waiting, of war. From Private Samuel Hayes, written to Grace Granger, describing training camps, long nights. The bond he shared with the pup he called their future. Had called Justice, a living promise that he'd come home. The final letter wasn't from Samuel. It was from the War Department. A cold official notice. Samuel had been killed in action. Ethan's hands trembled as he placed the letter back into the box. The attic, once just a room, now felt like a mausoleum, sealed by silence and grief. Every object, every layer of dust whispered of time standing still. There were no new letters, no photos of growing old, just the memory of a life that paused the day the telegram arrived. Grace had lived her whole life in this house. She had never married, never left. She stayed here, waiting in her own way, surrounded by memories, the ghost of a promise that never came home. And now, Ethan could feel it too. This house hadn't been abandoned. It had been preserved by love too loyal to let go. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. The collar, the photos, the letters, the little wooden carving of justice. There was more than memory in that house. There was legacy, and Ethan knew it needed to be honored. So the next morning, he turned to what he knew: investigation. After weeks of searching, long nights hunched over his laptop, Ethan finally uncovered a digital obituary. Grace Granger, gone nearly 2 decades ago at the age of 92. It was short and simple, yet it held the clue he needed. She had been survived by a younger brother, Thomas Granger. That was the thread. Patiently, Ethan traced Thomas's family line, following it down through the generations, building a family tree, name by name, until it reached the present day. At last, his search led him to the county's public property records. There it was, the deed to the old Granger house, legally transferred after Grace's death, now belonging to a distant descendant. His name was Nathan Granger, an architect living in Seattle. One quick search revealed something that made Ethan's heart sink. Nathan had recently filed a land sale request for the Granger property. If the paperwork cleared, the house and everything inside it would be bulldozed within months. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't a man used to making emotional appeals, but this wasn't just emotion. It was duty. He picked up the phone and dialed. Nathan's voice was polite, but guarded, sharp with the tone of someone too busy for ghost stories. But Ethan's voice was steady, honest. He didn't dramatize. He just told the truth. After a long pause, Nathan agreed to visit that weekend. When he arrived, sleek car kicking dust up the old road, Ethan didn't take him to the house. He took him to his own cabin where the footlocker sat open on the table. And as Nathan flipped through the photographs, something shifted in the room. He had gone silent, his hand hovering over one black and white picture of Grace and Samuel, their smiles still alive in silver tones. His thumb traced the shape of the young soldier's uniform, then lingered at the puppy sitting between them. His voice, just moments ago, cool and professional, was now caught somewhere between disbelief and reverence. Then a soft sound at the screen door, a low thump, the kind a dog makes when it shifts its weight. Nathan looked up, and there, framed in the afternoon light, chest rising with each quiet breath, stood the sable shepherd, still watchful, as if he had known exactly when to arrive. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Nathan slowly stood. His eyes didn't blink. His breath hitched. "Echo," he said, barely louder than a breath. At the sound of his name, Thedog's ears perked, his head tilted. Something ancient flickered in those amber eyes. Recognition, memory, joy. And then the silence shattered. The dog let out a soft whimpering cry. His tail long still began to sweep side to side, not the cautious wag of a stranger, but the uncontained, unfiltered happiness of someone who had finally found home. He bounded forward, years of restraint melting away, and in a heartbeat he was at Nathan's feet, the whines, the nuzzles, the wagging tail. It was joy overflowing, as if trying to reclaim every day they had been apart. Nathan knelt, stunned. "Echo! My God, you came back!" His hands shook as he buried them in the thick fur. His voice cracked beneath the weight of what was happening. It was the first time Ethan had seen Shadow, no Echo, wag his tail, spin in circles, whine with joy. It was like watching time fold in on itself. The same dog who had waited outside a forgotten house for weeks had also been the one who vanished months ago from a Seattle apartment. What had drawn him here? What invisible thread had led Echo to the exact place where a soldier's story had gone silent? No one could explain it, but no one needed to. Some truths don't come with answers, only meaning. Nathan didn't put the land up for sale again. Instead, he returned every weekend, trading blueprints and boardrooms for lumber, tools, and gloves. With Ethan's help, they cleared out the broken windows and ivy-covered walls. They opened the curtains, let light back in, rebuilt what time had nearly erased. Room by room, the Granger house breathed again. Echo ran freely between the two homes, tail wagging, always pausing by the front porch. Still keeping watch, but this time with peace in his eyes. Ethan, once a man seeking silence, now found purpose in presence. He wasn't hiding from his past anymore. He was honoring someone else's, and through that, somehow, he was healing his own. The letters, the photographs, the color, all of it found a permanent home inside the restored house, a quiet tribute to a soldier who never returned and the woman who never stopped waiting. Some promises outlast a lifetime. Some stories wait for decades to be heard. And sometimes it takes a loyal heart on four legs to carry them